Komið öll sæl og blessuð. I know there's a person or two in the audience whose first language is not Icelandic. So, apologies, I will deliver my address in Icelandic. But in 5 minutes or so, I'm basically saying we need to do something. So here goes. Föðurland vort, hálft hafið. Þau orð má finna í sálmi sem Jón Magnússon birti á árum heimsstyrjaldarinnar síðari. Og skeið voru þau kjörorð landhelgisgæslunnar. Svo þó ekki lengur og margt annað hefur breyst í tímans rás. Sjávarútvegur var meginstoð íslenska velferðisríkisins sem varð til á síðustu öld. Fiskveiðar, fiskvinnsla og fisksala. Þetta snerist verðmæta sköpun á Íslandi. Þegar öllu á botninn hvolft, þá lífið þó fyrst og fremst saltfiskur. Segir í Sölku Völku skáldsögu Halldórs Laxness sem kom út á kreppuárunum og dró skáldið þannig saman í örfáum orðum hagsögu landsins þær mundir. Miðbik aldarinnar hófst svo fyrir alvöru barátta fyrir fullum umráðum yfir auðlindum hafsins umhverfis Ísland. Þorskastríð voru háð, lokasigur vannst árið 1976 þegar önnur ríki viðurkenndu öll 200 sjómílna lögsögu okkar Íslendinga. 2 árum síðar minntist Gunnar H. Ólafsson skipherra þorskastríðanna með þessum orðum. Skemmtilegast þó að þótt landsmenn rifust allt og alla í sambandi við landhelgina, sýndi það sig að þegar í harðbakkann sló á miðunum stóð öll þjóðin saman sem einn maður, hvar í flokki sem menn annars stóðu. En síðan komu varnaðarorð framtíðina. En þá öllum átökum Íslandsmið lokið? Tæplega. En þá eftir 4. og kannski erfiðasta þorskastríðið. En það að rækta upp aftur hálfdeydda fiskistofna í kringum landið. Og nú stendur þjóðin ekki einhuga lengur. Hagsmunir rekast á hagsmuni og bróðir á móti bróður. Þetta stríð verður þó að vinnast því án þess öllum sigurum í landhelgismálinu á glæ kastað. Ef illa tekst til það okkur sjálfum einum að kenna. En ef vel tekst til mun sjórinn veita okkur þann auð sem þarf til uppbyggingar öflugs iðnaðar og betri lífskjara í sjálfstæðu landi. Síðan liðu árin, við Íslendingar höfum deilt það hvernig til hafi tekist við fiskveiðistjórnun og verndun auðlinda hafsins. Því munum við halda áfram. En allt bendir þó til að fiskistofnar séu ekki lengur í hættu að líkindum vegna þess að hin síðari ár hafa ráðherrar í meginatriðum farið að fiskveiði ráðgjöf vísindamanna. Leið verðum við að víkka okkar sjóndeildarhring þegar horft til framtíðar. Og nú jafnvel meira í húfi en nokkru sinni fyrr. Nú þarf að verja lífríki heimshafanna, sporna við mengun, hlýnun og súrnun sjávar og ofveiði innan og utan lögsögu ríkja hvarvetna í heiminum. Sérfræðingar í vistkerfum hafsins óttast sumir að voðinn sé vís, verði ekkert að gert nú þegar. Stækka þurfi verndarsvæði úthafanna og grípa þegar í stað til margvíslegra annarra aðgerða. Það brýnt fyrir okkur Íslendinga að fylgjast vel með þeirri umræðu, taka öflugan og virkan þátt í alþjóðlegu vísindasamstarfi heilbrigði hafanna og leggja okkar lóð á vogarskálar í alþjóðlegum stofnunum. Ég þakklátur fyrir að fá tækifæri til að flytja stutt ávarp við upphaf þessarar málstefnu. Hér verður rætt ástand hafsins og verndun sjávar utan 200 mílna efnahagslögsögu ríkja. Þá verður minnst á nauðsyn þess að öll stefnumótun nýtingu og verndun lífríkis heimshafanna byggist á langtímasýn, frekar en skammtímasjónarmiðum skjótfengin gróða. Leið og ég tek heilshugar undir þau sjónarmið, lýsi ég þennan fund settan. Takk ykkur fyrir.
Þakka kærlega fyrir, kæri forseti. Mjög gaman að segja þetta, kæri forseti. Hér sem sagt mættur til okkar Dr. Laffoley, en hann sérfræðingur í vistkerfum hafsins hjá Alþjóðanáttúruverndarsjóðnum. Það hérna útskýringar líka á erindinu hægt að finna hérna frammi. Og hann ætlar að fara hérna og með cirka 20 mínútna fyrirlestur fyrir okkur og síðan að honum loknum og þá getið þið spurt hann spurninga. Welcome, Dan.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to be here. I haven't mastered Icelandic, so this will be in English. It's a pleasure to be here. This is the second time I've spoken. The last time was 2 years ago, and I'm very honoured to be asked back. In 2 years, a lot of things have happened. I'll be telling you some of the latest science about the ocean and some of the things I think we might be able to do about it. But on a lighter note, in the last 2 years, my country's decided to leave the EU, and as we found, it's difficult for me to admit this, but as we found this last summer, you play much better football than we do in England. So let me give a little bit of a context to who I am and my passion for the ocean. As I mentioned last time I was here, I'm an islander. So I was born on Jersey in the Channel Islands, 9 miles by 6, much smaller than here. So I've lived an island life until I had to leave for university. So I think this is what gives me the passion for the ocean. I've been connected to the ocean through all my childhood. I'm 6 years old there with my brother and my parents on the west coast of Jersey, where I spent most of my formative years. I'm fortunate enough now to be in a pretty unusual position in the International Union for Conservation of Nature. I'm the figurehead for them for ocean protection and management in the World Commission on Protected Areas, where we organise the work of 11,000 leading scientists around the world. And I also have a role advising the Secretariat. And as an islander, I see this as a massive opportunity to be able to help share information about the state of the ocean, to connect people, and to let everyone draw their own conclusions and to offer suggestions and help if they want it in terms of how we tackle the massive change which is sweeping the ocean. So I'm going to lift the lid on the ocean and show you some of the latest science that's actually happened since I was last here, and talk to you a little bit about that, and then some of the tools I think we need in the toolkit if we're going to cope in the future. When I grew up, it was the first time we'd really seen our world from afar, the Apollo space missions, and it gave us an amazing perspective on our world. What sets us apart is the ocean, and we see it small, blue, delicate, hanging in the dark void of space. Of course, since then, in the intervening years, a lot of things have changed. It's become a digital world, so I can bring the ocean to you, to this very meeting, and talk to you about it and bring it into the room. The Indian Ocean, the world's shallowest and warmest ocean. The Pacific Ocean, dotted by small island states, really showing that from one angle of Earth, we are just ocean. The Atlantic Ocean with the erratic zip-like fastener of the mid-Atlantic ridge going down the middle. And then oceans which are a real concern now, compromised by climate change, acidification, ocean warming I'll talk about, such as the Arctic Ocean. So in the next 15-20 minutes, what new information can I share with you? What new ideas can I suggest about how we cope with the future for the ocean that we want? And that brings me rather neatly, with a little help from Google, to the hotel. Isn't technology wonderful? So what have we learnt in those last sort of 40, 50 years as I've grown up? Well, what we've learnt is that the ocean isn't as we thought it was. We thought the ocean to be this vast expanse of seemingly unchanging habitats. And the reality is that it's full of diversity of life. If you look at the deep ocean, we have seamounts, cold water coral reefs. We didn't really even recognize cold water coral reefs till perhaps 20, 30 years ago. It was all about the barrier reef in Australia, but we know they're a haven for life. Canyons, even reefs made out of sponges. But what we've learnt in recent years is it's much more than that. It's not about just the wildlife and the habitats. It's about what we call the services that it provides us. Some of them are hidden, that we never think about, the carbon role of some of these habitats, how they recycle nutrients for us. But others are about that delicate balance in ecosystems that support the fish stocks, the things that we value. So we're linked in whatever way and vision you have about the ocean. We also know that the variety of life is mainly in the ocean. New habitats have been uncovered within the last few decades that are completely different to anything else we know elsewhere. Hydrothermal vents, the American submarine Alvin off the Galapagos Ridge in the 1970s, mid-1970s, discovered these smokers, these hot springs on the deep ocean seabed. It's similar places to that NASA are using as the analogues to think of what life might look like on other places like Europa. It's the ocean that will give us clues to where life may be elsewhere in the universe. Methane seeps, and even sort of near the 1990s, the idea that entire ecosystems form in the deep ocean around whale falls, the dead carcasses of whales going to the seabed. But it's also a place of wildlife spectacles. Whether this is wildlife that you exploit or wildlife that you regard, it's what the ocean provides us with. So it's all about opinion, it's all about position. So what do you see when you look back at our pretty Earth? Do you see the most beautiful planet that we know? Do you see the planet that actually provides us with 50% of the oxygen? It's amazing to think it wasn't till the mid-80s that we discovered that the most photosynthetically abundant organism on the planet isn't some variety of tree or species of grass. It's the thing that's shown in light green here. It's called Prochlorococcus. It's a minute organism that gives off oxygen. And if you're mathematically minded, someone somewhere has calculated they exist in several octillion, and an octillion is 10 to the 27, so there's a lot of them. Or do you look back and do you see that there's work yet to be done? The open ocean, the area in light blue where we don't have the full toolkit. We may have different debates about what we want to do out there, but we do need the right tools in the toolkit if we're going to actually manage our way out of the problems I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. Or do you look back and realize that since we saw the Earth from the Apollo photos, we're changing the whole ocean? 95% of the living space, 70% of the surface of our planet, out of sight, out of mind, but our impacts are quite astounding that we're having on the ocean. It's the ocean that supports us. When we actually really, and it was amazing to think we've known about problems in the ocean for 50 years, 100 years or more, but it was only last December that we started to put the ocean at the heart of climate policy. And when we look around the universe at our blue planet, we realize that's actually what sets us apart from other places that had oceans like Mars. And what we realize is, along with being far behind over embracing the ocean in some of the policy decisions, we've not done that well in protecting it either. Just 4.1% of the ocean is covered by marine protected areas. And as I say, a lot of the open ocean, we still don't have any of the basic toolkits. And it's not just about protecting the ocean, it's about ensuring that if someone does something, for example, in the vicinity of your country, it's properly assessed. You know, we want good standards that are consistent across land and sea. So what we find when we look at the ocean, and we look at the different ocean basins, is there's a repeating kind of sequence of events: fishing, pollution, mechanical destruction, introductions. But the bit that is worrying so many of us now is the last bit, is multiple stresses, synergistic effects. So these are not the things that are easy to manage, but are the things we are going to have to manage. This is ocean acidification. This is ocean warming. And this is the fact that the ocean in various places, because it's warming, is containing less oxygen. And that brings its own host of problems. A lot of this is to do with carbon dioxide. When I started giving this talk, this was the graph. I now have to add a bit on. So that's how much carbon dioxide, 402 parts per million by volume, is now in the atmosphere. And perhaps the rate of change still doesn't bring it home. So I'd encourage you to look up the level of carbon dioxide when you were born, your birthday in carbon dioxide. I'm 50-ish, bit older. That's where I was born, in the last 20,000 years. So 2/3 of the spike of carbon dioxide have been since I was born. And this is causing significant problems. I'm not going to talk too much about this. I spoke about this 2 years ago. It was tremendously heartening to see the discussions that followed between the industry, the fishing industry, and the university to look at this within Iceland, and I think we'll hear a little bit more about that in a minute. This is the fact that the ocean's absorbing 26% of the carbon dioxide each year, and that's coming at a price. It's heading it towards more acidic conditions. And the only thing I'm going to show you is the animation I showed last time. So you'll see the date on the bottom left, and you'll see the pH of the ocean reduce as the Earth rotates. Now, ocean acidification, the reaction of carbon dioxide with the ocean, is simple chemistry. We're measuring it, it's happening. It takes a bit of time to get going, but then the reality is that the oceans acidify. It may look like it's in the future, but you've got to remember that if we cut carbon dioxide emissions now, it's 2030, 2050 before we see an effect. So we have to start now to really prevent and tackle some of these real challenging issues. And unfortunately, as I said last time, in your part of the world, you're really in front of what I describe as the bulldozer of this. This is going to take much more effect at higher latitudes. But let me talk about something which is new, something that we've been looking at since I was here last time. And this is the whole issue about the warming of the oceans. So there was one line in the last Intergovernmental Climate Change report that just simply said, since the 70s, 93% of the enhanced greenhouse effect of our activities has gone into the ocean. And if you just plot it by decade, you'll see exactly what I mean. Now, what we wanted to do was, in the same way as we've been shedding light on ocean acidification, is bring this issue alive, and rather than just talk about effects on coral or fish, look comprehensively at what this was doing to the ocean. So the last couple of years since I've been here, we've produced the most comprehensive, in-depth study ever undertaken. This is it. I bought one copy for you, Mr. President. It's very heavy. It's 246 pages of peer-reviewed information on what's happening for ocean warming. We worked with 80 scientists from 12 countries. There is, by the way, for those of you who want a smaller version, I have some copies of the 8-page summary, just to reassure you. This has been done since the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change did their last studies. It includes 27% of the references are completely new. For the weather chapter, where we now say that hurricanes are increasing in intensity but not frequency, 76% of the references are new. It's new analysis. We've published the names of all the scientists, so you have a yellow pages of people to go to. And what it is about is the fact that a lot of the heat has gone into the ocean. It's really difficult from this to get an idea of just how much heat has gone into the ocean. So let me describe it in one way that we use to introduce the report. If we had put the same amount of warming energy into the bottom 10 kilometers of the atmosphere that we have put into the top 2 kilometers of the ocean since the 1970s, our Earth's surface would have warmed by 36 degrees centigrade. So we have put a massive amount of warming into the ocean, which is now locked in. So this is a process. Effectively, what we have done unwittingly is none of us are the casual observers in the room now. We have put ourselves in the test tube with the experiment, and we didn't realize the experiment was running, and we're now seeing the results, which I'll talk about in a moment, and they're predominantly not good for us. These are some of the organizations that contributed. And usually for reports where you ask people to sign up their logos, there's a bit of discussion. In this one, everyone said, use our logos, tell the story. For every single chapter, you have a consistent approach which tells you what the warming effective, what we think is happening. This goes from microbes to whales. This goes from pole to pole. It covers the habitats in between. It covers from the coast to the deep ocean. We've looked in more ways than people have looked before, and we've actually asked the scientists, what do they think we should do about it? So, for example, who knew that kelp forests are dying? You know about the coral reefs, that the heat events in the ocean are killing kelp forests over hundreds of kilometers and they're not returning because the ecosystem is going to a different state. Who knew about the fact that the mangroves, which provide essential defense for countries from storm events, are actually now dying back over vast areas? Who thought that in places like Asia we might be predicting minus 40% in fish catches by 2050 or so? So these are real things, and what we've been able to do, which was slightly alarming, was connect them not just to an impact, but to our values that I talked about at the start. So we have this warming ocean with this real challenge in front of us. So what future do we want from the ocean? What options do we have? Well, there's many things we can do, but we need to decide what course we take. We can just continue, and we'll be overwhelmed by these stresses, these much wider range things than things we can manage easily, like fisheries. We could sustain, we could restore. Our challenge is the multiple stresses are going to make our lives much more difficult, and we need more ambition. We need to act quicker in more substantive ways. We need to think bigger. And we need to make sure, because of the delays in getting mechanisms, decisions with other nations, that we have the right tools. You might choose not to use some of them. Other countries may use them, but you should have the tools in the toolkit. Many actions can be taken. We need to cut carbon dioxide straight away. We need to think of the resilience of the ocean. You know, if we deplete everything, this storm is going to sweep through much more harder than it would if we have places that have more ecosystem connections. We need to build the knowledge base. You know, it's amazing that it is, 2016, and this is the first time we've really looked at this in this way. We need to protect more. We need to give places that can recover when some of these events happen. We need to have the tools for governance. We need to remove perverse incentives that make people do the wrong thing. And we need to be more sustainable with greater transparency, involve more people, and invest more and engage people in new ways. One of the things being looked at the moment, there is a process running on that. In terms of conservation action, you'll see a marked change through ourselves and through the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have a global target most countries have signed up to about how much of the ocean we should protect. But we've never embraced the bit in red, which is about other effective conservation measures. These are places which end up having the same result as all this difficult conservation stuff, if I can call it that, but actually produce measures that protect and value the ecosystem. The origin may be different, the journey may be different, but the value is in the end result. And we've been asked to produce new guidance on this for countries around the world so they can recognize such places. And they will augment the current system of protection. They'll enable us to work with many more people from different sectors. For example, historic protected wrecks. If you have a large area of them, actually produce an ecosystem and biodiversity benefit. We've never acknowledged that. So there are new ways we can look at things. It will give greater visibility and status, and it will focus on conservation outcomes. And again, rather like the high seas, this is moving at quite a pace. So by the winter, by Christmas 2017, new guidance will be available for countries. And finally, and this is really me personally as an islander, having kind of struggled with some of these things, I think there's a need at a national scale to collect knowledge, to gather thoughts, and to prepare a plan. What you're seeing here is something that came out of a question that I was asked by the UK government some 10 years ago now. They couldn't get a handle on what was happening on climate change in the ocean. So we created something called the Marine Climate Change Impact Review, which was effectively everyone was going to start spending little bits of money. So why don't we just put it all together and come together and understand what is happening across the board, all the different types of impacts, on a standard confidence, both now and the future. And we now have pretty advanced understanding, even regionally around the UK, of all the different types of impacts. What I would offer is I would be more than delighted if there was interest to share with you how we did it. and what the challenges were and the opportunities. But I do think having a common base, not just on ocean acidification, but on ocean warming, on sea level rise, on many of these other things, enables you to start from a better place in terms of making decisions for the future. And on that point, I'll stop and thank you very much indeed. Thank you.